sometimes the answer isn't how do I get 100 more customers? It's how do I increase the revenue with my current customer base? How do I add more value?
AltaVista, the highest view in contractor marketing.
If you're not listening to the angle, you will surely fall behind.
Are you going to exist in your space, or are you going to dominate?
Trust the process.
Are you planning for today or adapting for the future?
This is the AltaVista Angle. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the AltaVista Angle, the podcast by AltaVista Strategic Partners. Today we have a great topic. We normally talk about sales, marketing, and acquiring new customers, but today we're here to talk about something that's really important to every business, and that is how do we grow organic revenue with our current customers? Before we dive into that, we do want to kick it over to Ray for a quick economic update, the same way we start every episode. Ray, what do you got for us?
Well, good stuff. Thanks. Look, we're in August here. So most contractors, whether you're commercial or you're residential, we know this isn't the best month, but a key month on both sides is September. And September to year end is a real positive time for both commercial and residential contractors. We've seen really good flows on the commercial side. Again, I'm not going to call this a booming economy, but a very steady economy. On the residential side, we see it's steady. Again, a lot of folks are going out of business. We think that'll continue, which means the remaining players should benefit. I'm pretty optimistic about the fall season. We do have a midterm election, which tends to slow some decisions down. So you might want to prepare for that. You'll hear that a lot, and waiting for the midterms to come through before we make a decision. So be ready for that. But what I talked about on last episode, and I've highlighted this for a while, is one thing, is interest rates. And we talked about it on the last episode, but I'm going to talk about it again today because the 30-year Treasury from the U.S. government hit 5.2%, which it hasn't hit in over 20 years. Now, you may not be an economist, but higher rates is not good for any piece of our economy. So I just think you have to yield to a bit of caution here. 30-year mortgage rates are close to 7% today, another negative sign. And you've got the consumer is getting weaker. Saw some stats on consumer metrics, auto loans, credit card debt, still going higher, not going lower, going higher. So again, the economy is strong in a sense because the high-end consumer is strong. The corporate America is pretty strong. The AI build out is fueling a lot of our economy right now. I think we all know that. But if that low end consumer gets weaker and weaker, rates go higher and higher, that's not good for anybody. So you have to watch interest rates. So if you want to follow what I think on the economy, follow the 10-year. It's at 4.6, 4.7 today. That hits 5%. I tap the brakes a bit and prepare yourself. I don't care what AI is doing. If we hit 5% on the 10-year and it doesn't change trend, you got to watch yourself. Be cautious with your investments, your company, your capital expenditures, everything. So I sound like a broken record, but that's what I watch every day. And I watch a lot of other metrics, but that one's a little bit concerning right now.
Cool. Well, Ray, thanks for that. And I think that's actually a really good segue. If we have to tap the brakes or we have to slow down a little bit, right? What becomes important to any business? Sales, right? Today's topic. Organic sales growth with our current customers. The old saying, your best customer is your current customer. Kick it over to you guys, right? Why is this so important to every business that they have a plan to really grow that organic revenue?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I always think of the old adage, right? Not, you want to go a mile deep, not a mile wide. And sometimes the answer isn't, how do I get 100 more customers? It's how do I increase the revenue with my current customer base? How do I add more value? And I think that's always, something we look at AltaVista internally. But, there's revenue to be had, right, with your current client base. And that's, I think, a big piece of increasing that revenue share.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to a commercial contractor, remain nameless. They had about 30 years of heavy growth years, and they don't want to grow anymore. They really don't. They just want to They don't even want to work with clients that are using them for, say, 10% of the work, right? They want to work with the clients that use them for their expanded services because they have 7 or 8 different services they offer. They don't want to be a bid factory. So their whole business strategy is to take the ecosystem in which their clients are in their business, take the happiest clients, and then expand services and get deeper with that client instead of getting wider with a lot of clients. Now, that's not the right solution for everybody. But again, when you're 30 years of growth, maybe there are times where you want to start this strategy. And I think if the economy does slow down, and one other caveat is we have heard from folks that construction may be slowing down in some spaces. It's a great time to run a strategy to your current customers. It's not just that simple though, right? It's not a one-step process to upsell. People think it's really easy to upsell and cross-sell customers. It's actually a lot harder. And I actually worked in a business that had multiple service offerings when I was purchased. And I learned a lot of the intricacies of how to effectively run the strategy. It's more complex than people think it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And I do love, if we're going off analogies or sayings, right? That mile deep versus mile wide, that's actually, that's the perfect one. So kudos to you, Bryan Dunkel, for that one. That's a great commentary and a great thought around this topic. Ray, from that experience, right? What's the first thing you got to do?
Well, obviously you need a plan, right? You need a plan to do this. And, you've got divisional leaders. You've got to align these divisional leaders. You want to make sure your service offerings are exceptional in all these other divisions, right? So if you have a weak division and you try to implement a cross-selling plan, people won't push services to a weak division. They actually will build up a bigger wall internally. I watched it firsthand. It was unbelievable. One division was weaker than the rest. People stopped selling or cross-selling there. That division took an attitude where we're not going to push services back to you. There was a bunch of infighting internally within the organization, pretty big organization. And it didn't work. It did work to a small level, but to maximize it, I think building a plan, making sure your organization is set and prepared for that, and that your team is aligned, right? If the team isn't aligned, which means alignment, and they view and value that as if you have a client, let's look at it this way. If you have a client who is your best client and you're doing electrical service for them and the HVAC division wants to meet them, well, you're going to be very cautious about giving your best client to a division of your company that could potentially screw it up, right? So making sure that you guys are mutual aligned, you see the benefit. There's going to be some hiccups in the cross-sell, the upsell. There's going to be times where Susie says, hey, HVAC messed my relationship up. Then the walls start to go up internally again. So you just have to accept that those things are going to happen, that the cross-sell, upsell, getting deeper with a client is better to the long-term benefit of the relationship.
Absolutely. And then, so relationship, right? That's a great I'm glad you ended with that one. Because, plan, absolutely need it, super necessary. I think the point on the divisional alignment, that's actually something that I think I wouldn't have thought of, right? But super relevant. Relationship, obviously important in all sales, all business, right? Bryan Dunkel, how important is the relationship in this part of things, in this area?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. Relationship is everything, whether it's trying to get a new customer or try to keep an existing customer happy. And that all goes back to trust. And I think that's kind of where Ray is going, where, again, if you're doing the electrical work and you've built this trust and this relationship, you better hope that mechanical side or HVAC side can deliver on that same level of trust, care, customer service, et cetera. So, it's paramount. You, without, the trust and the relationship, you have nothing. But that's also what makes it so important, is because if you can be a one-stop shop, or you can provide, a host of additional services, that makes the relationship stickier. We talk about being sticky at AltaVista all the time. And again, if you can be a one-stop shop, one phone call, one service provider, and I know that's, unrealistic in a lot of different ways. But if you can provide that with the same level of expertise you've done on the previous side, what are the chances of you keeping that client long term? Those chances go up.
Yeah, and I think that, that relationship, once you've built the trust and you have the relationship, that people want to work with people that they like. I think that's very true. I think people come to you as a resource. The sale does get a little easier. What I was thinking there that really stood out to me in your comment, Bryan, that, in my mind is so painful when someone says, I didn't know you did that.
Yeah.
Like, that's just like a knife in the gut as a business.
That's every day.
Every day, of course.
Every day. Yeah.
It's just but I mean, it feels like you got punched, right? Because you're like, hey, I would have loved to use you. I didn't know you did that. I would have loved to have used you for that, right? Like, that one's so painful. So, I mean, we assume that we get this plan, we get this strong divisional alignment. Everybody can kind of pull their weight, right? When we have those elements in place, we have all these things. There is still a challenge of that. I didn't know you did that. And how do we overcome that, right? And so, all part of the plan, right? But I think once you're putting those building blocks in place and you're kind of ready to go, how do we go about making it known to the customers? How do we try to get some of that, I didn't know you did that, right? How do we educate them? How do we get in front of them?
I'll go on that. But before we cover that topic, I want to stress that on the client side, we talked about owning the relationship in a previous episode.
Yep.
If you own the relationship, this will go really, really well on the client side. If you don't own the relationship, it could still work. It could help deepen the relationship. On the execution side, equally as important, if you don't get the execution right, you're going to blow this up in your face, right? Yeah. So I love to talk tactics, but I want to stress it to the client or whoever's listening to the episode that I've done this. I've done this so many times in my career. I did it again internally at my own company. I did it externally with a company that purchased us, and I watched it blow up. Now, it didn't blow up in our faces where we couldn't recover, but it did blow up in our faces. And the goal is to maximize this. One of the things that Bryan said was he talked about jack of all trades. Sometimes that can be a little risky, but within your service offering, make sure you offer all the services within your offering. That if you don't, that's an invitation to your competitor to wedge their way into your account.
Yeah. I mean, Ray, two things I remember about, that would, I think back to just in our relationship over the years, like within your electrical business, right? You would be like, we have a bucket truck and that was a differentiator. And then you did the infrared testing. I think you said that was a differentiator, right? But right. Again, you have these differentiators, you have these services that take a relationship deeper, and you were still just electrical at that time. If that guy doesn't know you don't have if your customer doesn't know you have a bucket truck, you're never going to sell them bucket truck services.
That's right? Correct. Yeah. And let's look at those services. Let's look at infrared. We only did about a couple $100,000 in infrared testing, meaning we go into the switch gear of a mall. We put a thermal scanner onto the gear, make sure there's no hot spots, no resistance levels. So the mall's not going to burn down. It's a preventative maintenance item. $200,000, not a ton of money in revenue, but guess what? The repairs came from the test. So if I allowed a competitor who did infrared to do it, then they have a shot at the repairs. So I actually had to offer infrared testing. I had no choice. And so it wasn't a great business for us. We didn't make a fortune off of infrared testing, but we kept the relationship. We got deeper with the client. And that's what I'm talking about here. And the education of that is, I think, where we're going next. How do you educate your customers of these services?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a good question here too. And it's an interesting one that is, who owns the education, right? Is it the salesperson? Is it the electrician? Is it the service manager? Is it the account manager? Is it, who's responsible for this? And at the point of attack, right? I think that would be a great question that I would have for you guys is, whose responsibility is it, right? Because we're going to say, how do we educate them? How do we make them aware? But who's ultimately responsible for it?
Everyone.
Yeah.
Great answer. Love that.
Right. And then how do you align if you have 450 employees or 200 employees or 50 employees? How do you get the receptionist, the account managers, the technicians, the controller, right? Internal marketing folks, sales folks. How do you get them all aligned to talk about, hey, this is the consistency and the approach that we're going to take? It's complicated. It doesn't happen in just, you're going to flip the switch and say, we're going to start cross-selling and upselling. That's why we talked about the alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I was going to say too, from an AltaVista perspective, when we, have a lot of strategies, SEO, database marketing, paid search, we have different account managers, right? Managing each one of those strategies, right? And all of them manage a relationship, but then we also do have one point of contact, right? Mm-hmm. One main POC within that relationship where everything kind of rolls up. But again, to your point, everyone has the relationship, but then there is one person that really is the one who is kind of the talking head, if you will, or the person you go to when you need something.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great point. Let me interject on that, because I think that's really well said. I think that we talked about this a bit on a previous episode where I spoke to, if you're not in managing a relationship, if that's not your role, and maybe that's not Dunkel's role or Hockel's role or my role in a given day, even if it was, say, Aaron's and Brian's role, I would still have a dedicated relationship manager to every single customer. Someone is blocking and tackling every day. So when they call at 12:17, if Brian's on vacation, Susie Jones answers the phone. She's the relationship manager. She can field the call immediately. So I do think you need a tactical relationship manager for all your customers. If they're recurring customers, all your customers.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Right. And so we have that person. What I want to kind of dive into is this plan, right? Because, we know we need it. We see it's important. What I would say is, what are 2 or 3 things that have to be a part of this plan or this strategy? Like tactical, actionable. These are some things we should be doing or putting into a plan to educate our customers.
I'll start with that one too, because it won't be popular, but if you don't do it, it's not going to happen. Does anyone know what I'm going to say?
CRM. Oh, buddy.
If you think you're doing this free, I mean, it's close to free, right? But I love when people are like, I'm going to get into data centers. I think I'm going to switch my business. That doesn't happen. I'm going to start cross-selling is just as difficult. Well, maybe not as difficult, but it's not, you just can't turn a light switch on and start upselling and cash starts rolling, and you have to invest a little bit of capital. You got to put a marketing strategy behind it. You got to do some work. You've got to do some training in the organization. It's not going to be free. And it's a time game. It's not an instantaneous game. This is a time game. And if you looked at your business, if you took your external growth and you put that on the side and put it in bucket 2, in bucket 1 is your current customers. How much of the customers of the revenue you have do you retain? And then over the next 3 years, how much more are you getting from that same bucket of customers? Did you grow without the new client growth? We measure this at AltaVista. I don't know if you guys know we measure this. Yeah. We have a ratio that we used, and you want to be above 100 with the ratio that we use. So if you're at 100, it means you're growing within your current customer base. So if you're not tracking that internally, I think you should track that. We started tracking about 2 years ago. We've been growing at 10, 20, 30, 40% a year for the 14 years of our existence. But how are we doing with our existing customers? Isn't that such a crucial metric that we should look at? Not a lot of businesses look at that. I don't know the name of the ratio. It's a retention ratio that mostly software companies use. And we enacted that into our business. So I do think tracking that would be good for your company. And then, again, you'll have a scoreboard for the next 2-3 years, let's say.
Yeah. I was going to say telemarketing. Like, should we pick up the phone and call them and tell them what we do? When you ask, like, what's your guess for what I'm going to say?
It's not bad.
Not a bad idea, right? But I do think in this plan building thing, like, what are actionable things that we talk about? Like, you should have a strategy in place to email your customers. And through that awareness that you're keeping in front of them, put other things that you do in there. Talk about other things that you do, right? If one division drives 80% of the sales, that newsletter, those informational updates, that email, 80% of that email should talk about the 20%, right? People have to be aware, right? I'm just thinking, how do we get over this? I didn't know you do that question, right? So I think an email campaign to your current customers with a set approach and cadence, super important to this, right? Bryan Dunkel, you got anything?
No, I was going to say this all goes back to what we've talked about on previous episodes as well. Touch points. If you think you're just going to send one email, some value add, hey, do you know now we offer electrical services, right? As an HVAC company, or as an HVAC company, we now offer plumbing. You can't just say, I'm sending one email and, I'm going to wipe my hands. We did it, right? We're cross-selling, we're now in the game. You got to touch points. So that can be social media posts. That can be the newsletter, like you talked about, Aaron. That can be including your services in your email signature. It can be a postcard. I mean, there's so many different ways to introduce. Or on the flip side, hey, now we've expanded. Now we don't just service Baltimore, Washington. Now we service Virginia, Pennsylvania, whatever it may be. You have to educate. You have to provide the value add, and you need to be consistent. And that all goes back to the company approach. That goes back to the tech on site, the office manager, any estimator, the people providing the work, right? Leaving those nuggets. We do this now. We XYZ. We have expanded. Your website, obviously, that's another one. All these things have to be aligned, and that's where Ray's talking about. You'd have to put some money behind this. If you're going to,
I love all those ideas. It does boil down to really one thing: increasing engagement. Yeah, right. I saw a truck the other day. It was maybe it was an electrical truck. It was so well done. I very rarely see on a truck their services the way they're listed that it makes sense. This was actually a rolling billboard. Mm-hmm. It was fantastic, by the way. Yeah. And the fact that I don't remember, maybe it could have been better.
Yeah. It was so good, I forgot who it was.
Look, if AltaVista designed it, I would definitely have remembered it. Yeah. But no, it was a rolling billboard. But it's about engagement. So getting more face-to-face contact, more lunches, right? The rule, if you don't take them to lunch, somebody else will. That still exists today. Engagement at the touch point. You mentioned maybe calling your folks. If you had an internal service rep call 25 customers in a day and say, this is Bill from AltaVista, do you have a second to chat? I think the customer would say, yeah, sure, I have a second to chat. It's a lot easier than cold calling somebody. Hey, I just wanted to see how we're doing, right? Maybe get a pulse on the relationship. Yeah, things are going well. And then is there anything that's challenging you in 2026? And is there anything else we can help you with? Maybe we better implement that because that's pretty good. I don't think we're doing that right now.
Well, I think a really good one too that I kind of in my notes was before the show put together was like, what about an annual facility review? And if I'm the director I'm the electrical sales guy, hey, Ray, can we do our, once a year, I'll just stop by, walk through, see what's going on, talk to you, what set it up. Well, if I just bring Bryan Dunkel, our HVAC guy, that's a really good way to kind of get touch point visibility in front. You know what I mean? It all kind of just sort of ties together to the touch points and the engagement. I have a question, Ray. It's kind of a hot button thing, right? Is I get ads from a certain company and they say, hey, we empower our technicians to make $40, $50, $60, $70, $80 an hour through upselling services, right? It's an ad. It's all over my Instagram without naming companies. Their strategy is really, we empower your technicians to become your salespeople. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's imperative, but there's a significant amount of risk when you do that. And to speak to my experience and my age, if you want to Google Warner Plumbing and Heating,
no idea.
1987. I talked to my dad, who was old school electrician, about the success of Warner Plumbing and Heating. They were in a high growth business magazine, and they had their technicians on the upsell. And it was one of the reasons I talked my dad into letting me take this thing over and running it. And then this is a true story, by the way. You got to Google this. I've never told you this. 3 months later, 2020, does an undercover episode in Washington, D.C. on Warner Plumbing and Heating. These guys were ripping off retirees, 80-year-old men and women, selling them units. They got busted. They went out of business. Look it up, Warner Plumbing and Heating. And so, yeah, it's essential, but you have to make sure that, again, you have alignment in everyone in the org, the value proposition, the importance of, being trustworthy and scrupulous. And, if your technicians can handle that, yeah, you should absolutely have it. From their talk tracks, even your invoices should have your services, your t-shirts, the apparel they're wearing, the trucks, right? Everything has your service, the email signatures, everything has your services on it. That's not enough though. That is probably the second touch or the third touch for me. The first touch is getting that engagement where you're talking to a client. Hey, we do other things now. We have an HVAC division. Well, that's great. I'm good for now, but circle back with me later. Then they see it on an email signature or they see it in your newsletter. And then their HVAC company fails and they call you and say, hey, let's have a conversation. Right. So it's multiple touches, even within your current client base, to make this work.
Absolutely. Bryan Dunkel, anything else on this kind of maybe some plans, some strategies, anything you got?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I take it for Bray, who was in the business, but to Ray's point, I mean, it's all about how you incentivize people. And if there's maybe too much of a commission, you might be digging your own grave, like Warner Plumbing and Heating, right? So, everyone's got to be aligned. I mean, again, that's every strategy. But again, there's additional revenue out there with your client base. So that's why this is such an impactful topic.
That's why we get punched in the gut all the time, right?
No, to your point, it's the worst where it's like, oh yeah, our new website's going to launch in 2 months, and you're just like, oh my goodness, like we do that, and we make it known. Our report, our dashboard, you kind of scroll down, it highlights additional services we offer. And then we do newsletter, we do everything, and it still falls through the cracks.
So I've got a good one for you. So we, on our invoices, we listed all of our services on the invoice. And we actually had a call from like the controller one day saying, hey, I needed this infrared testing done. I didn't know you guys did that. So just put it on everything. It's that part's free, by the way. That's the only part that's free.
Free actionable items. Get it on your website. Get it on your invoice. Get it on your next round of T-shirts. Right.
Email signature.
Email signatures. Right. Get it in those easy. Take the easy wins. Right. The easy actionable steps of website, email signature, invoices, social media, newsletter. Right. Some of those are some pretty actionable and easy to implement strategies for where you can
on hold. Oh my God.
Call AltaVista and get put on hold, and you can hear an example of this. Right.
Yeah. Call AltaVista. We try to put you on hold for at least 15 seconds so you can grab the services.
Do you need digital marketing services? Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I had an on hold message at McLaughlin Electric, and it was hysterical. The line was, not everybody has a 60-foot bucket truck or the willingness to use it on your behalf. And it was so cheesy. And I was out with two of my best customers, and I was just about to change it. And they said it made them laugh so hard every time they called. I didn't change it. And I got razzed at association meetings. Like, are you willing to use your bucket truck on our behalf? But hey, that's good marketing. And it was an accidental phrase slipped in there. But again, on hold recordings, people are listening. I mean, if they're on hold, they're probably, they're engaged. They're typically calling you for a reason. Don't leave them on hold too long, but just 10, 15 seconds, and maybe they catch a piece.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I got a key question here, right? Which is, we're now talking about all these ways to do this, right? Maybe it's the technicians helping on when they're on site, whether it's on hold, email, we phone call them, we set up a facility review, all these things we've talked about, right? What's a good way to make sure we're striking a balance, right? Like, you don't want your customers to feel like they're constantly being sold something, right? That is an important feel to all of this, right? How do we, how do you appropriately balance that? Is there any red flags or indicators of like, hey, I might need to throttle down here? What do you guys think about that?
Dunkel, I have something. If you want to go, I'll let you go first.
Look, it's a delicate balance, obviously. That's why I think some of these monthly touch points, these almost non-invasive types of strategies, the t-shirts, the invoices, the signatures. Look, if you're peppering your client base every week, you probably want to pump the brakes a little bit. That's my approach, right? Right. Obviously, I'll defer to you or pass.
Yeah, no, I think it's twofold for me. Aaron said this on a previous episode. Sometimes you just have to ask. And that's sales, right? You have to ask.
Yep.
And so even with your existing clients, sometimes you have to ask, but knowing when to ask is critically important. I think what Bryan said, making it so it's non-invasive. When we do our marketing to our clients, I have a rule. We can promote services, but every time we promote services, we must add value one other time. So if we're going to send a piece to a client about our SEO and how great it is and why you should have already signed up for it if you haven't done it yet. So just make note of that. But you're going to get an educational piece on something happening in the industry or something valuable to you. So we want to be thoughtful and thorough and not just pepper the upsell. Because if you're peppering the upsell, you're arguably not doing it right. That means that you're forcing it on the client. But it is okay to ask. It's absolutely okay to ask. It's absolutely okay to check in with a client and say, hey, how are we doing? All right. If I put this in AltaVista's domain, how are we doing? You guys are doing great. Do you have any changes coming up in 26 or 27? Are there any other projects that you're doing internally on the marketing side we could be assistance with? I mean, how is that painful? So how we ask, not only when, but how we ask.
Yeah. And I think timing is critical too, right? And the how and the when and all those things. But when I say timing, what I mean more is event driven and being aware of what's going on, right? And, a really easy example would be if an AltaVista customer asks us about, can you market? I'm an electrician. I just got an HVAC division. Can you help me market it for you? Hey, is that on your website? Right? Oh, no, it's not. All right. Hey, is it on your logo? No, it's not. Right? Like timing things, right? One thing that I kind of got in my prep notes here was if your technician's at a facility, you're at a property, if they see something and maybe they can't get to the property manager, take a picture of it. Hey, Ray, we were at the property and we noticed these 3 lights were hanging off or whatever, right? Hey, we were in the parking lot and we noticed these 2 pole lights were out. We have the willingness to use a bucket truck, right? Like some of that little event driven type of thing, I think can also be a really good opportunity to ask because it's tangible and real to the customer. You're not just calling them and saying, hey, Ray, do you want me to buy more things from me? Hey, Ray, we noticed this is going on. Hey, Bryan, we saw this when we were out last. Right? Could we help you with that? Yeah. I think that's something that's a good like event driven kind of timing of things, right?
I think that's a great idea. And look, if I would have done that, I would have had to have Polaroids on every truck. So.
Yeah, Aaron, what you're talking that it's just a wedge, right? Yeah. It's a wedge to have a conversation, very similar to what kind of you were talking about earlier, right? Where, the feedback part too. It's like, where do I kind of parachute in? And it could be, electrician is out on the property, they do a great job. You get feedback from the property manager. Hey, Bob Smith was out here, did a great job. Hey, I'm happy to hear that. Oh, by the way, I don't know if you noticed, we also do X, Y, and Z, right? We'd love to serve you to the best of our ability. So it's the communication, it's the relationship from all levels. and it's asking the questions, and then that's where you kind of strike, if you will. But again, without asking or without having any feedback, you're in the dark.
That also just gave me a great idea, right? Like, hey, you want to know who to ask, who to target first, right? Because some of our AltaVista's customers might have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. I mean, some of these huge customer bases, right? If you run a net promoter score for your business, send them all a survey on a scale of 1 to 10. How likely are you to refer us to a colleague or other person? If you get 50 people who say a 10, maybe those are the 50 people you should call and talk to about this, right? Kind of that feedback loop and kind of doing that at scale and letting that sort of inform, these are my happiest customers, right? I should probably call these guys first to see if they want to talk about other things, right? So I think that was something that just kind of came to mind right on that feedback comment of, you're accomplishing two things there. You're getting a touch on the customers, you're getting feedback. You know what I mean? You're doing you're combining a lot of really good marketing activities into one sort of bucket there with that kind of approach, right?
Well, and I like the concept of taking the picture and education. I think that's really expanding the service and being a better vendor. I'll share with you, when my car goes in for service, they videotape. Range Rover of Annapolis videotapes everything they're doing, and they show you, Mr. McLaughlin, here are your tires, here's the gauge we measure with, you're getting close. And so there's no question of whether I need new tires or not. It's made the auto repair experience just so much better. And you don't have this contentious relationship like when you send your car in and you need new tires, your timing belt's probably going to go. And you're like, am I really? But if they showed you a video of it, you trust it. And so I think that's just enhancing the service offer.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I think too, now with things like company cam and other photo sharing things, right? Like, I know from our customers, contractors are taking hundreds or sometimes even thousands of pictures within a single project or property, right? So that evidence probably already exists, right? So I think that's
some are sending them with the invoices, by the way. I've seen some clients that actually send images with the invoice. I think anything you can do to make the relationship less opaque is perfect, right? Just strive for clarity, trust, and you get deeper. And then again, upsells become more natural.
Yeah, absolutely right. What's a mistake you think people are making in this area?
They have no plan. Even the big companies just don't have a plan. They, how do you, one of my mentors believed in, if you don't assign somebody the task of running that function in a sole source fashion, we talk about this AltaVista. Well, we're going to let Susie, who has a day job, handle this, right? It's not going to work. We've seen that internally. But if we give Bill the client service manager job and say, hey, Bill, you're going to go in and this is your job, they're going to drive this. And we've seen it internally. We have someone whose job is to actually look at the client and figure out what other services could benefit this client without pushing. And again, the comp plan, which we mentioned earlier, is critically important because you do want to incentivize people for success, but success at the level where the client is benefiting, not where the sales rep or the client services person is benefiting. The client is getting the reward, and then the reward for the compensation is just because the client's happy.
Yeah, and I think that reward to the benefit to the customer is the ultimate thing too, right? I think as long as I think one mistake people make sometimes, whether it's AltaVista, other organizations, probably everyone's guilty of this a little bit somewhere along the journey, is if you try to sell somebody something they don't need or it's not imperative, going back to the mechanic, like they're just, I think you need new tires, but those tires only have 8,000 miles on them, right? Like if you're trying to push and promote or sell things that aren't going to add value or solve a real problem for the customer or be the right strategy for the customer, right? Or be the right anything for the customer, I think that's a mistake that everybody kind of can be guilty of a little bit, right? So I think that's a big mistake that people should really be aware of like, if I'm going to encourage a customer to do this, or I'm going to take a picture and send it to them, like, am I actually solving a problem? Is it actually something they truly need? Or am I just trying to sell them something because we have a good relationship and they trust me? because you can
Yeah.
erode that trust, because you can erode the trust really fast
Correct.
too, right? It's a long time to build, pretty fast to just vaporize. So I think that's an
Yeah.
important thing that I see a mistake that people might make along the way.
Look, if you're in one-time sales, if you're in one-time sales, and we don't talk a lot about this, and I've sold a lot of different services in my life, and I did some one-time sales selling, it stinks because you have to close. That's it. End of story. If the guarantee on a roof is 50 years and the guy needs a new roof, you better sell it to him that day. So it is a little bit different on a one-time sale than a recurring sale. So I want to acknowledge that for people that are listening that may sell a one-time sale. You still want to be honest and scrupulous, right? But when it comes to the recurring customer, if you should never breach that trust, it's going to hurt you. In my business, in the electrical business, which is, again, for clarity, that's been 20 years. If I would get slow in December, I would simply call clients and say, look, are there any projects coming up next year that maybe we could get a crack on early? Or I was at your facility and I noticed that, these pole lights are starting to show their age. Maybe we should start looking at putting some, new pole lights in, giving them ideas. But it was always just, hey, and I would say we're getting slow. So these are some ideas that I have, and I'm not putting any pressure on you. And they're like, yeah, what's funny, Ray? Those pole lights, they do need to be replaced. Like parking lot C is definitely an older lot. We need to get those up to speed. And as a favor, they would just say, go, I'll issue a PO for that. How much is it going to be? So just having the dialogue and being honest with the client. Every year I would call a client and tell them, hey, we're getting slow. Do you have anything coming up? Now, these were the trusted clients. These weren't some GC. And I was like, hey, we're getting slow. All right, we'll do it for free, right? No, these were the trusted clients that we would reach out to and just be honest and say, hey, and I would actually offer discounts. Like I said to a guy one time, I'll give you a little discount on that project if we can move it into December. And they would just say, just go ahead and do the job. You don't have to give me a discount. Because again, you're in the relationship business at that point in time. So it works both ways.
Yeah, 100%. I love that advice. Brian, anything on this one?
No, I had a quick question for Ray. This is, somewhat, I'm thinking if I'm a contractor listening to this episode and I'm thinking, let's just say I'm an asphalt company, I'm getting a lot of inquiries. Hey, can you do some curb work, sidewalks, concrete, right? What do you think the best approach would be if you're a current asphalt company or any service company and you don't have that division, but you see a need in the space? Do you look at acquiring a company? Do you look at maybe hiring someone who's specific to the concrete space who could maybe educate your current crews? This is just a topic that I just thought about. What would be the best way if you're looking to start, but you don't have that division in place?
So how are they performing their work now? Are they subcontracting it?
Yeah, you're subbing it out. You have a preferred sub, or
maybe they're saying no. Maybe they're saying no to some of it.
Or you're saying no. Exactly.
Or maybe they're saying no because they can't have a reliable sub, right?
The easiest way to start is always subcontracting.
Yeah.
Build a trusted relationship with a subcontractor that can do the work for you. Make sure you have a good subcontractor agreement where they can't utilize the benefit of your relationships, because I've seen that happen too. Start that way, right? Start with the sub relationship. If it's working, a lot of times these subs, you could do a deal with a sub, maybe acquire a piece of the subcontractor, fold them into your business. That's not going to be super expensive because a lot of these subs aren't fully integrated businesses. They're single offering guys. Maybe they have 2, 3, 4 people. We did that quite a bit. We'd find a contractor that was a specialist in something, start doing sub work, and then eventually see that they couldn't fill their pipe and try to do a deal with them. I like that approach where you're not going out and saying, hey, I'm going to go buy a concrete company or I'm going to go buy an HVAC company. We did buy an HVAC company, by the way. So we took an HVAC company that had $1 million in revenue to $2 million in 1 year.
Wow.
We lost $500,000. So, and that was in 2010. So the fact that we were doing deals in 2010 shows that we were either stupid or we had really big balls. I don't know which one it was. So it was probably both.
Yeah, I was going to say probably both.
Yeah, probably both. But we did the deal with this guy. He was really good at what he did, but he never made any money. And somehow our egos thought we could buy him out and get him to make money. Well, we bought him out for very little money, and we pumped a ton of revenue into his business. And he got the work done effectively, but he didn't know how to make money. And that's why we had to buy him out in the first place. So shame on us for not looking at the P&L and saying, hey, on the monthly basis, where are you bidding this work? And he was bidding the work too cheap. So yeah, before you go jump in the pool, try the subcontractor relationship first, or even hire somebody as a specialist, hire a concrete specialist or an HVAC specialist to come in and sort of start doing some of the work for you first before you go out and buy that business.
That's a great question, a great answer, guys. Yeah, certainly an interesting one, right? Like when they're asking for more, how do you make sure you're positioned to sell it to them, right? I think that would be the whole thing there. Yeah, that's really insightful. I mean, I don't have anything else on my agenda, my questions. I think we've covered a lot here today, right? We've come up with some action items. We've talked about this. Unless one of you guys has some more questions or this, I might just turn it over for kind of some closing thoughts.
Yeah, before we get to the closing thoughts, I did Google the ratio that we look at. It's called net revenue retention. So basically, you're excluding your new customers. And so if you did, let's just make it a round number. If you did $1 million in sales with your existing customers, and the next year you did $900,000 in sales, you had a 90% net revenue retention within your existing sales, and you continue to track that. You don't add the new customers in. Well, obviously that's not a good number, right? Software companies have used this for 25 years and they're looking for anything over 1. Yeah. So meaning I did $1 million in existing bucket 1. And then next year I did 1.1 million. You did 1.1 revenue retention. That's the math. And that's a positive number. And we do track that at AltaVista. And our goal is to be over 1. Meaning that within our, because you're going to lose customers, right? Even in the existing bucket. And so it's such a great ratio to look at. So I do encourage everyone to do that. And I just think long-term on this plan. This isn't a short-term fix, right? It's no different than when we talked to Jake about his process in cold calling. That's part of our client acquisition strategy, right? And in our business, we have a client acquisition strategy. And we have internal marketing that works on that. We have SEO works on that. And our inside sales work on that. So this is not your client acquisition strategy. This is your revenue retention or revenue expansion strategy. Who's going to run that strategy? Somebody has to run that strategy. So I think that's a good place to end, I think, unless there's anything else.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, right? Because that was the whole theme of the episode, which was, really organic revenue growth with our current customers. That ratio is great. Sounds like it's a pretty easy one to look at too.
Just because we talked about it. So AltaVista, we do SEO, website creation. We do digital advertising. We can help AI implementation.
Logos, graphic design, for sure.
Yeah. If you didn't know, call us. There you go. There's our plug.
Anything else to shamelessly plug here before we wrap it up, guys?
Good stuff.
We say yes to everything.
Oh yeah, we say yes. We're yes men too. That's the other, cross-selling strategy.
We say yes, we figure it out.
Yeah.
No, that's we didn't talk about that, but saying yes apparently works. Ask Jack Antwerp.
Yeah. Everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of The Angle, the podcast by AltaVista Strategic Partners. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Please download, please subscribe, give us a like, give us a review. We'll see you guys back on a future episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.